Good evening, VankPod. I am your host, Eve Davis Paul. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is episode 11. I am so happy to be getting back to you guys. Some of you know I was sick, wasn't feeling good. I'm still sort of on the mend, getting my voice back. So that's good. Today is Saturday, March the 24th. There's a march on Washington right now. For books, not bullets. We are all about protecting rights, and especially the rights of children. Those children grow up to become adults, and we want those children to grow up with the right things in their minds and not add to the chaos that our country is already so steeped in. So, the March on Washington, sending much love to all the teenagers, all the young women. I've got a chance to look at some of the videos circulating on social media, and it just warms my heart to see people actually making a change, standing up for what they believe in. I and Bank Pod are behind you guys 100,000%. Gun control now. Hashtag March for Our Lives. Thanks for tuning in. This is Eve Davis Paul, and you are listening to Vanquisher. Welcome to all the listeners, new and old. We appreciate you for listening to VankPod. If you have not already, head over to our website. It's www.vankpod.com. For the first time listeners, we spell it out, VANQPOD.com. If you have not followed us on Facebook, please do so. You can find us on Facebook at Vanquisher the Podcast, on Twitter at VankPod. That is again VANQPOD. If I haven't explained to you guys already, iTunes has a very funky algorithm. So it is imperative that you subscribe to this podcast, rate the podcast 5 stars, and leave us a review so iTunes can know that we are just as great as every other podcast that make the front page. We want to make the front page too. So please subscribe, rate, and review. It means the world to me. For my many listeners that are listening via Spotify, Stitcher, iHeart, Google Play Music, I appreciate every single download. I appreciate you guys for subscribing. If you would like to leave a comment, you can always head over to our Facebook page as well. That's again, Vanquisher the Podcast. Leave your comment there. Follow us there as well. We love keeping in touch with you too. Thanks so much for listening. You guys have heard me say it. I have to say it. It's a must. They make me. I am not a doctor. I am not a therapist. Please do not take anything that you hear on this show and try and substitute that shit for professional help. It is not going to work. It is just, from my perspective, the daughter of a narcissistic mother. I hope that it can help you too, wherever you are in this world. You already know I'm sending much love and much support to you, but do not take this shit and try to scribble it on a prescription pad. It will not work. So, now that we've got that out the way, let's start the show. Episode 11, Motherhood Mock-Up. This week, I wanted to touch on motherhood because we talk about narcissistic motherhood, maternal narcissism. We talk about the things that we go through as daughters, being the daughters of narcissistic mothers. But I want to start moving toward more focused segments. So I know that as a parent, I never really want to be seen as, the abusive parent, verbally abusive, mean, any of the things that will make my daughter feel what I felt from my mother. And so it's like some days I'm just like sort of hands off or super hands off. And then some days I'm more like, hey, give me your phone. Let me look through it. Let me make sure that, you're staying on task with your grades. But overall, I never want my daughter to feel distant from me, to feel emotionally disconnected from me. I never want her to feel like I'm not right there for her. And I'm sure that, there's other mothers who feel the same thing. So my number one fear as a mother is being emotionally disconnected from my daughter. My number two fear, and probably my only other fear, is being viewed through her eyes as abusive or emotionally abusive or verbally abusive. Um, so, I'm going to touch on a few topics, some things that I struggle with, some things that I have realized about my daughter and her generation, and the difference between my generation and my mother's generation, and sort of like how I'm learning to become an effective parent. It can be super frustrating because it's not like we got the tools from our mothers to be able to reference or to be able to reflect on and emulate. If we do emulate some of the things that our mother showed us or gave to us, things may not come out as good as we would want them to. So I just wanted to share a few things that I've learned along the way, and also a few things that my wife has taught me. Because, as you guys know, I have a daughter by marriage. It's my wife's daughter. She's 15. And although when I was living in Atlanta 3 years ago, I did foster 7 children at one time, over the course of 2 years, it was so different from now. The youngest child was 6, the oldest child was 13, and they sort of sometimes looked after each other. But growing up north here in Virginia, and having a teenager living in the suburbs, there's so many different kinds of scenarios, so many different kinds of things that can happen, so many different kinds of parenting that's frowned upon. And, I feel like some days I'm just lecturing the fuck out of my daughter, and I know that it probably gets on her fucking nerve because it gets on mine too. Um, Things that I've really struggled with is effective communication. I always want to be clear with her. It's so easy for us to reference as daughters. I'm sure, like, being confused. There were so many times that, as a child, I was super confused whether, Wendell was telling me to do something, asking something of me, explaining something, whether I was being reprimanded, whether I was being, hit and reprimanded at the same fucking time. So many times that I was like super confused. And we don't abuse our daughter. We don't put our hands on her at all. So that means that, like, we have to be like extra fucking to the T when it comes to our communication. And while my wife is pretty good with that, me learning since I've been no contact how to communicate in a effective and healthy way. It's like literally like learning how to fucking walk and talk all over again at 25 years old. It's just some days it's just so fucking difficult. I'm just like, God damn it. I really just want to say, don't fucking do it again. Period. Point blank. I don't really want to sit here and have a long discussion as to why, because I know that she knows why. But in the long run, what I know is that as a parent, when I'm clear, when I'm saying the reason why I don't want you to do this is because when I did it, I almost got abducted. Or when I was not using my time wisely, I looked forward and was in my future while looking back thinking, wow, was times I could have been filling out scholarships that I was sitting in front of the fucking TV. No one helped me with my college application. So I want her to take advantage of her time more, and there's so many things, and sometimes it's just like just not really knowing where to start, not really knowing where we are as mothers, because again, we don't have anything to reference. So many of my friends have parents and, specifically mothers who they can just pick up the phone and call, send a text message, ask a question. Shit, fuck, like half of them still live at home. So, um, not having that connection at all can sometimes just be like, I wish she just just wasn't this way. Like, I wish she had her motherfucking act together so I can call her and ask her, for advice on some days, or just call her and vent to her, about being a fucking mom. But while that is not our reality for those of us who are no contact, it's okay. I want you guys to know that it's okay. Motherhood is something that we do have to take one day at a time. There really is no manual for it. But what we can do is learn to start exactly where we are. I know that sometimes my fuse is so short with my daughter, like so short. And I just be like, oh my gosh, okay, I need to just go upstairs. I need to go to my own fucking room. Like, I need to go to my own room because right now, I just don't want to see you. Don't want to see you. Plain this fucking day. And sometimes when I reflect on when I was mad or being mad or whatever, it don't even be that fucking deep. But me not knowing how to communicate effectively, how not to get mad so easily, it's just like, ugh, fuck. I want to change this. I don't want it to be this way. So, with my daughter being 15 years old, she and I are only 10 years apart. I know it's creepy, but she does respect me as a parent. Um, Luckily, she is still a bubbly, Disney watching 15-year-old. She's not into boys. She's not into any of that stuff yet, to the point where I'm just like, oh, like nail biting and shit. So there's things that, I can still tell her and she still listens and she still understands. And on this end, as a parent, I'm just thinking, I just don't want her to have to go through all the shit I have to go through. It. I just don't want her to have to, fend for herself or, get in a situation and I'm not there to help her. Or I think that most times I'm operating from the mindset of a narcissistic daughter. And I'm going to explain why I say that. The situations that I went through as a teenager, some of which my mom had no idea about, some of which I have told her, some of which she probably thought and didn't know, they were based off of her being a narcissist. So it was things that I wasn't telling her because of how she was, because of the way that she dealt with things, because of her being abusive, because of her being verbally abusive, like because of her being mentally abusive and emotionally abusive. Like, it was so many different scenarios that I went through as a teenager and as a young adult that she would not even begin to fucking fathom if I had a conversation about them. Um, so when I think about, oh my gosh, I don't want my daughter to go through the things that I did. What I have to do first when I think right there in that moment is stop and slow down and remember that the reason why I was going through the shit that I was going through was because I was having to not tell, keep things from her for lack of better words to save my ass. As teenagers, mistakes are made, but I wasn't really allowed to make mistakes. So the mistakes that I did make, which were quite a fucking few, I never took them back home. I never took them back to her. The ones that she did find out about, I was just like, well, I guess I suffered a fucking consequence because there's so many others that you don't know about. So many situations that I had to fucking talk myself out of and, run away from and, like almost being abducted twice, looking for love in all the wrong places. Like, I don't want my daughter to go through these things. But the situation is not the same. So I'm offering to any of my sisters who are raising children, raising daughters, raising sons, just raising children across the board. The first thing that we have to understand is that our children are not in the situations that we were in. So we have to sort of ease our thoughts and know that we are affording our children a better way of listening and learning and understanding and connecting with us. Hell, just by listening to this fucking episode, you are one step closer to not raising your voice as much, to not stressing as much, to not being as hard on yourself as much as you have been. The situation is not the same. Our children do not have to fight for their lives growing up in a household with the people or person that takes care of them. Something else that I had to realize was also that common sense is not so common these days. There's so many distractions that our kids have on a constant daily basis. I mean, I see toddlers walking around with cell phones looking at YouTube or playing a game. And when you think about that, there is a specific thought process and thought pattern and, reaction time or reaction thought that occurs that is just so many years different than when we were dealing with situations as kids, when we had access to things as kids, and we have to take into account that difference. Now, I'm not saying by any means that when we ask our child to do something and it doesn't get done, to just say, oh, well, maybe my child didn't understand me, or maybe when I said it, my child didn't receive it as the way I intended to. If we are being clear and stating exactly what we need them to do, exactly how they should behave, what we expect from them, there's no reason why they should not meet and or exceed our expectation. But with the Snapchat and Instagram and group text and after school stuff and library chats and meetups and all of this stuff that our kids are constantly into, constantly cycling, they rarely have time to sit in the communication channel that we are in with them. So that means that shit, in the morning, I'll see my daughter. She probably takes about 45 minutes that she's in the house after we've woken up. And then she's out the door to the bus stop. In the evening, when I see her, I come in. She's done her homework. Tanisha and I are coming from work, and we're eating dinner or looking at TV. And then shortly after that, 9:30, she's in bed. So majority of her day is spent in a completely different communication channel. She's at school with teachers of different cultures, different backgrounds, different race, different beliefs, and then, of course, other kids who come from other homes that believe and communicate differently. Taking all of that into consideration, we have to sometimes reroute and restate what we expect from our children. I expect you to be hitting this mark. I expect you to do your chores, even though sometimes you might be tired. Letting them know that that's what life is. We are responsible for things. We have jobs. We have responsibilities. We have things that we care about, things that we want to do. But life still goes on, and we still have to upkeep, be respectful, be responsible, be well mannered um, to those people and things around us, thus including ourselves and our parents and our siblings, all of those things. Sometimes it really does take reminding our child that they do have a bigger purpose. So, our daughter is into American Sign Language, ASL. She's into American Sign Language and also theater. So, with her being so deeply interested in those things, what I've been trying to help her with is, you know, I'll throw a hint about maybe you can do like a mock audition on the YouTube channel, or, maybe you can write out. She's also a wonderful writer. I've been employing her to do like writing scholarships, sometimes rebuilding that connection based around something that our kid likes is all it takes for them to hear us. Because again, there's so many things that can get in the way. I only named the things that can get in the way of our child's brain and ears of hearing us. I didn't name the things that we go through, the coworkers, the bills, the boss. Um, I mean, Jesus, we know as adults that our list can go on and on and on and never stop. And then, even for ourselves, too, we have to remember that there is a greater purpose. Our happiness and our health and our wholesomeness is what we want to continue to grow and continue to strengthen. I know for me, remember my purpose with this podcast, remembering that, I have a family to take care of, remembering that I'm blessed to have a job, that there's someone else that may not have one, and that a short time ago, I didn't have one for a period of time. Thinking about those things are like a reboot to me. Um, Something that I also struggled with was not having my child believe in me. My daughter is aware to a certain extent of how my childhood was. Of course, she spent time around Wendell. Of course, she has experienced situations with Wendell that made her uncomfortable. But having at the time I got married to my wife, our daughter was 13, and it was super difficult coming into a relationship with a teenager, but not only that, with a girl. The girls need so much. They need the nurturing, they need the protection, they need to be told that they're beautiful. All of those things they need, and as the dominant one in my marriage and in my relationship, I had to not only somewhat fast track what I lacked in that department as a daughter so that I could give it to her as my daughter. But I also had to work on my self esteem, also had to work on what I thought of myself and, the things that I gave to myself mentally and my thoughts and the images that I put into my brain. Because those very images and those very things that I felt about myself and the way that I saw myself would eventually either hinder me from loving her properly and giving her the things that she needs as a young lady, or it would just be short-lived. So, excuse me, before it was short-lived or I was not able to provide that to her at all, I began working on myself. Now, this, of course, was before I went no contact. When I went no contact, so many things that I thought I had understood as a mother had to be sort of recalculated, reworked out, rethought about, and reformulated to fit a healthier thinking woman, to fit a emotionally healed woman, and to also fit a mother that wanted to help raise a young woman that was emotionally healthy. The first things that I noticed was that not only was I able to separate myself when it would be something that she didn't do or a chore that was, half-ass done or whatever, like, the little things that we go through with our kids, they happen, right? So what I noticed was that those two things that I struggle with that I told you guys about, growing angry super fast and not being able to communicate effectively, those things ceased because focusing on the end goal, for lack of better words, focusing on that and taking myself out of it was what made not only my communication effective, but it also allowed me to not get angry as fast, but to try to understand why something happened. Try to understand what could have went wrong and whether it was a communication, whether she misunderstood, whether she was rebelling, whether, she was just being lazy. I started to think in a different way and not just in the way of someone that is so used to dealing with one way. Um, we typically can easily associate um, emotional feelings back to bad situations in our life. The worst situations that I've gone through were directly connected to Wendell. So when things happen, I think that my emotions would go from 0 to 100 because I was thinking about not wanting to continue to have to tell her something, not feeling like having to sit down to talk to her about something that I've had to talk to her about before, not feeling like explaining myself or explaining the reason why I want her to do something again. I had to separate me from my parenting. for lack of better words, so that she could understand that it was solely about her upbringing, about her development, because we, of course, don't want to replicate the about me mother. Everything's about me. It's not about you. Why do you have to do this? This is making me feel so um those are the things that we went through, you know what I'm saying? And the first thing I noticed when I removed myself was that not only was she able to see that I do want the best for her, that I do love her, but she also was able to listen. Not listening from a place of, oh, I have to listen to you because you're my mom and you have my best interest at heart, but listening because I was letting her know, hey, you are going to be great and you are going to be successful because it is in you, because of the choices that you make, because of how you learn. Um, I was raised being told that I was going to be successful if it killed me because I was Wendell's daughter. And that really never really made me feel like anything. It just made me usually feel like, okay, so I'm supposed to be successful and good because you're my mother, but what is so good about half of the things that you're doing? You don't even necessarily acknowledge my feelings, acknowledge me as a separate individual 99% of the time. And I am supposed to get excited or feel empowered when you say things like, you my child, and I know you ain't stupid, and you gonna be something because you my child. First of all, and even hearing that, I was a big English major in school. So I would listen to her trying to reprimand me verbally. She would lecture me as I got older. It was just like, okay, I'm going to just talk a hole in your fucking head. Because knocking a hole in my head after a certain point, it just wasn't working. And, you know, as you guys know, up until I went no contact, she still thought it was okay for her to put her hands on me. But it came a point where I would just be listening to how fucked up her grammar was. Like, you, my, we this, we that. Now, don't get me wrong. Y'all can listen back through my podcast and I use the same slang, but I'm learning that, you know, the shit ain't cute. It ain't ladylike. And if I don't watch it, you know, my daughter is going to grow up and be using the same damn slang. She does look to me to set the example of what to do and how to react and, you know, ways to say things. And, you know, she tells me, you know, don't curse and don't say this and don't say that. And it's something that you really have to appreciate having that bond. Being the daughter of a narcissistic mother, I never thought personally, I never wanted to have kids. Um, it wasn't something that I wanted to do, and being blessed to be a part of a child's life and help raise a child in my marriage, it's just like, wow, you know, someone's looking to me to do something to see if they can replicate it or make it their own. And that's always such an endearing thing. And to have that bond, it's something that can't be broken, it's something that can't be replaced. I don't know how Wendell and any of our moms for this matter could see us in our precious little selves and not appreciate our eyes looking to them for an example. Children are so precious. And when I say things like our little eyes used to look to our mothers for an example, for love and for protection, I want you guys to have that and receive that as confirmation that this disorder was so far beyond us. It literally was nothing that we could have done. It from the beginning was a lose-lose situation. If you are sitting and thinking that it is still your fault, that it is still something that you can do to save the situation, to resuscitate the situation, to breathe life into the situation, stop and understand, wherever you may be in your adulthood, that if, as a little vulnerable, precious little child, if you could not be seen by her then in your purest, most delicate form, you are probably completely invisible to her now. And I know that hearing that hurts and hearing that stings like hell, but it is only the beginning of so much greatness, of so many doors that can open for you, of so many hands that are willing to hold your hand and walk through the fire. It is not over for you. It's not over for you. There's so many days that I was going through situations. My wife and I would go through situations with our daughter and just look at each other and shake our heads like, what are we going to do? And we laugh about it now, but and trust me, in those situations it wasn't funny. Nothing really major, but just those things that you just kind of scratch your fucking head and you're just like, what the fuck? Like, I don't fucking understand. Like, what is wrong with you? No one's abusing you. No one's starving you. No one's depriving you of anything. Why can't you just act right? Um, the the solutions that we came to find and that I began to exhibit and research rang true. They began to shed light on the very dark places that not only I had never been able to go because I wasn't given them to be an effective mother, but um, my wife's mom is not with us either, and she was a very very precious woman. So it's like, the one that has wreaked havoc is still probably wreaking havoc for someone, and still really just not respecting the boundary. And my wife's mom, who was kind and who cared about everybody and who loved everybody and who was a wonderful mom and a good grandmother and all of these things. And not saying that my mom is not or was not. We all know what this podcast is about. I'm not here to sugarcoat to make things seem what they were not. I'm simply stating the motherfucking facts. So, I think I recently got wind that one of her friends listens to the podcast. That is perfectly fine by me. Um, Keep passing on all the information that you want to pass on. But as I was saying, it's sort of like the mom that we needed is resting in the sky, and there's always more than one way to look at that. She's watching over. We are able to pull our strength from her, infinite strength. Now that she has eternal and infinite life, we're able to pull infinite strength from her. Oh boy, some days just is just so much harder than others. The solutions that we can sometimes think our solutions could just be like not working, and trying to fit a square block into a round hole, and it just isn't working. But a couple of solutions that I found do work are ones that I was already like sort of in the area of doing, but sort of just needed to change my mindset, just do like somewhat of a shift, kind of turn it on its side, look at it from a different point of view, so that I was able to execute it in a way that better served the child. Because what we know is that we are all adult children of narcissists, and with us being parents, we want to be able to evaluate this in a way and set boundaries and make solutions for our child that serves them so none of our children are making fucking podcasts when they get older, um, for adult children of narcissistic parents. um, what I noticed is that when it came to consequences, removing myself from the consequence was the most effective way that our daughter was able to learn from her mistakes. When I put myself in the consequence, like taking something from her, like her phone or her TV, or lecturing her, when I put myself in the consequence of a mistake, it made the focus of the issue me and not her action or her mistake. It made the focus me being mad about it and me talking to her about it and me taking her phone, or me taking something from her. You know what I'm saying? Like, it did not solidify that it wasn't the right thing for her to do, or that the mistake she should not make again, because all she was able to focus on was that I was mad, that I didn't want her to do something again, and that I was taking her phone. When I would be needing her to focus on, you could have done this instead of this. We wouldn't be sitting here going through this. And I would not have to spend 20 minutes or 30 minutes after work talking to you when I could be relaxing, when I could be de stressing. So removing myself from the consequence made it easier for her to see the mistake and for her to also want to correct the mistake. Now, this doesn't mean I don't discuss with her, a better choice, what was going through her mind when she made the mistake, or, how she could avoid making the mistake repetitious. This just means I don't make her mistake about me more than it is about her. I solely give her 100% space to see the mistake, deal with the mistake, and move on, basically. Because as teens, they're going to make mistakes. As preteens, they're going to make mistakes. As little kids, they're going to be little tattletales or little troublemakers. It just is what it is until they are adults with the proper twos. But until then, shit will happen. As we know, shit will happen. And when we compare the shit that we went through to how we raise our children, we do want there to be a significant difference. With us being involved in the consequence, our kids are only seeing that consequence as punishment and not as a repercussion to something that they do. This second solution probably was by far the most difficult for me. And I think that it has, of course, gotten easier over time because I am no contact. I found that being in contact with Wendell when I would be sort of hands off emotionally when it came to parenting my daughter. And I think it was because I was still being emotionally, verbally, mentally, and I guess shit, physically in some situations as an adult before no contact, abused. So it seemed like when I was supposed to be present in situations as a parent, I wasn't able to. And then when I went no contact and I was only focusing on being a parent and not a daughter, I would just get upset like so fast. Like I would just be like, "Oh my gosh, like I don't understand like what's going on with you? Like I need you to tell me if something's wrong with me, and just don't put yourself through necessary stress. You're a teenager, you have your whole life ahead of you. Don't get caught up in thinking that your friends in high school will be there for the rest of your life." Like I would just go so far into certain situations. And I think again, it was because it was reminding me of my childhood. Now, what I had to understand was that I did have anger, and that anger was tucked away in different areas for different reasons, different seasons. But that in order to effectively manage my anger and my emotions when I got upset or when I was disappointed or whatever the case was in dealing with my daughter, I had to deal with that anger first. Like I legit had to be like, okay, like you're mad at your mother. And while that's okay, are you going to deal with this shit, or are you going to continue to be a hands-off parent when you have a young lady who is about to be going out into the world around other people that she has to communicate with? Do I want her to be hands off when it comes to situations that may be important, for situations that may be life changing, for serious situations, And I had to really be honest with if I wanted her to deal with situations in the way that I was dealing with them. And that answer was a big fat no. Like, definitely not. I don't want her to get angry in, 1.2 seconds. I don't want her to not be able to think rationally when she's upset. Those were all the things that I didn't want her to go through and do and exhibit. So I had to deal with my anger. I had to write down things that really, really, really made me upset. A few of those things was having to leave college twice to come home to take care of my mother. And along the entire way of taking care of her, her never being grateful, her never saying thank you, her never being appreciative of me coming back to not only take care of her, but take care of her and everything else. When I could have just chose to stay at college and be hands off. Um, so that's sort of like, I guess I just had a realization there. The time that I could have been being hands off, I didn't get that time to. Even as a teenager, I didn't get that time to. There was me always needing to do something, be emotionally supportive to her, through breakups, through bad friendships. I mean, it was just so much. It really was. It was a lot. And I guess as an adult, anything that caused me to be hands on, I did just the opposite. When I went no contact, I noticed that I was like ODing, like I was over fucking doing it completely. So I had to realize, okay, there's some things that you're angry about. You need to work on those things. You need to do the truth check. I talk about the truth checking in the beginning. What's true about this? What's untrue about this? Why? How is it affecting me now? Is it valid now? Can I throw it away? Am I supposed to be keeping it? Should I shelf it until I have more information to understand it? Should I go researching, why I may feel this way? Where did it start? Where is it coming from? Is it still growing? Those are things that I had to really sit down and evaluate. And when I did, I noticed that a lot of the things and a lot of the emotions that were tied to the reasons I was getting angry were rooted in someone that then at that point I was not in contact with any longer. So it was a little bit easier for me to let those things go. And for the things that I did not let go, I assessed how I currently felt about them, because what I do know is that there were things that I wasn't really, really over yet. And while that's okay, I do have to give them an eviction date, right? So, in knowing, okay, I may not be over um, being physically abused, I may not be over that. When I see, somebody in the store hitting a kid, I get angry and sometimes I do say something. Um, which lets me know, hey, you may not be over being physically abused. Because there's other people who will just say that person is disciplining their kid. Um, when I also hear other people talk about their stories of abuse as a child, I get really angry and I get really emotional. What I had to realize is that, okay, while you feel these ways, what do you feel about the abuse that I endured as an adult? And I came to find that, yes, it was unfortunate. Yes, it is something that I'm still working on, but it can no longer grow. I cannot be abused anymore as an adult by her. And another thing that I learned, guys, is that I could have possibly been allowing abuse from other adults in my life because I was still allowing it from the person that birthed me. Think about that. Think about one person in your life right now that you are allowing to run a fucking muck. And think about, if your mother was not in your life, was not abusing you, would it be easy for a stranger to come into your life and do what the fuck they want? I guarantee you, more than less, you'll probably say no. It probably wouldn't, because our mother sets the tone for how people, especially people who may be like of authority, a boss, an older sibling, they set the authority for how those people are allowed to treat us, because they're the only standard that we're looking to compare these people to. It's like, well, if my mom used to abuse me. I can get into a situation where somebody else might be abusing me and not really have anything to say, okay, this isn't right. This doesn't feel right. This doesn't look right. But when our mom is able to do it, she sets that stage for anybody to come in to do what they want. Um, so really getting a handle on my anger, why I was angry, and how I felt about it now. Because sometimes we can think about why we're angry and only think about when something happened or how it happened, those past tense kind of thoughts and statements that aren't really in the present tense. Getting very clear with those things, bringing them to the present, knowing when we can throw them away, if we can shelve them, or if we can just research into why to find an answer that allows us to give ourselves a little bit more freedom to be able to relinquish them, which leads me to my last solution. And I somewhat laugh when I think about the extremes that I've gone to trying to drive a point home with my daughter. Of course, none of them were like, no kids were harmed in the making of these consequences. But I just chuckle because I'd be like, Jesus, what were you thinking? Um, but it is something that I can laugh about now because while I may have had a fear of being seen as the verbal abusive parent or being seen as the mean mom or being seen as the one that just doesn't understand, I can laugh about it now because I know that all of the fears that I had, I was nowhere close to hitting those marks. The strangest thing, sometimes we can be our own worst enemy, guys, and not knowing how other people may think about parenting or, not really having anything to reference at all. Some people don't even think to type in shit about parenting on Google because it's like now I'm asking the fucking computer and the internet and strangers to teach me how to parent. And it's like, I'm not fucking doing that shit. But, here we are on this podcast and we're all learning from each other. My last solution is calming the fuck down before taking action. I cannot tell you guys how much this shit has saved my child's life. Like, just last week, what was this? Last Monday. Me and my wife got in and it was a few things that were supposed to be done before we got home and they weren't. And then there were some things that were done. I went up to her room. Her door was closed. She was downstairs talking to my wife, and something just told me to go up to her room because she had showered and she was just like, oh, I did everything, yada, 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 blah, 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 blah. And I opened her room, and her room literally looked like an airplane flew through it. Now, I know we live in, very liberal time, and, our kids are very relaxed, and it's just a room. But there has to be a line somewhere, especially when there's things that just should not be on the floor. They just shouldn't be on the floor. Especially when we've replaced these things 2 and 3 and 4 times. And opening her door last Monday, I was just like, what the fuck? Like, I don't even understand. So I go downstairs and she's sitting at the table talking to her other mom, and I was like, what the fuck is happening in your room? Like, what is going on? She's just like, I don't know. Yeah, I really need to clean it. And I'm just like, yeah, you definitely do. Like, I just don't even know like what to do. And, my wife is sitting at the table. She's chopping vegetables. She's already irritated because, it's just like we know when our kid has been procrastinating, and this was when we just had given her social media back, right? So it's just like, what the fuck, dude? Like, what the fuck? I'm only gonna tell you this one time. You get to that point, I'm only gonna say this shit one time, and I'm freaking out in my head. But I kept calm. I was just like, go get my tool bag. And she's looking at me like, what? I'm in my robe and my slippers. You want me to go in the garage and get your tool bag? And I was like, no, yeah, like, go get my tool bag now. So my wife gets up from the dining room table. She goes and puts the vegetables. Forget what she was chopping. Oh, it was vegetables for chili. She goes and puts the vegetables in the crock pot. My daughter comes back into the house with my tool bag, and I said, I'm going to have to take off your bedroom door. Now, my daughter loves fashion. She does her makeup in the morning. She loves getting dressed. You know, she has her privacy. We respect that. Yada yada yada. Blah 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 blah. She looks at me like my door to where, like she was just like, huh? So I was like, we obviously have to take off your door because you rather close the door on the mess instead of clean it. And this morning your room was dirty, and I just went on and on and on and on and on and on. I led to telling her to bring her notebooks downstairs so I can look at her homework. Um, and just reiterated that just because we gave you your social media back, that does not mean that you can just do whatever the fuck you choose or do whatever you want. And of course she knows that, right? So in the lecture, it was a short one because I was just ready to be done with it and eat my dinner. Um, I had to sort of stop and think, if she doesn't have a door, she may hear noises from her parents' room that she may not want to a little bit clearer than she usually would, right? With her door. So if y'all could have fucking seen me, now I gotta re-explain why I changed my mind in like less than a minute of taking her door off, right? So I was like, I was going to take the door off, but now I don't feel like it. I've had a long day. I don't want to deal with it. And of course, y'all know me. I damn sure said it. I said, and I don't want you to be horrified if you hear something coming from your mother and I's room. So my wife, she's so precious. She was like, what mama is trying to say is that you get to keep the door for now. And I'm just like, yeah, for now. Don't get used to having it. She's standing there looking like I've never not had the door. So sort of confused, but as long as I get to keep it, I'm fine. Yo, the shit was so fucking funny. Like, it was so funny. When I recounted the shit, I was just like, dude, like, calm the fuck down. Take a moment after you have seen some shit that your child has done or not done. Take a moment to just digest the shit, figure out what you're going to do, go sit on the toilet, read a book, do something before acting because you might be re explaining why you're not doing something after you actually think about who it's all benefiting. Now, this was not an arc moment. Um, but it tickled me fucking pink when I recounted the fucking situation. Like, I was like, I'm taking your door off. That's it. If you can't respect the room, if you can't respect the stuff we give you, then you won't close the fucking door because it won't be on there. And then 2 fucking seconds later, I was explaining why I wasn't taking it off. And shit was just fucking hilarious. Those three solutions, like, to me, are the best starting point for really changing. If you're having an issue with your style of parenting or perspective, or just want to just try something new, maybe whatever you're trying right now just isn't working. This starting point for me with these solutions could not have turned the way that I parent around and also help me in interaction and communication with other people, because I know that y'all have some people in y'all lives that are grown adults that act like children too. So sometimes we got to use these solutions in more than one place, but in starting with our children, they are so precious and they will always matter. And we never want them to feel disconnected. We never want them to feel like they aren't seen or that they're the parent or any of those things. Because we all too know what that feels like, and it doesn't feel good. So, of course, I'm glad to say my relationship with my daughter, once I began to make the necessary changes as a parent, has strengthened, has gotten better. I didn't have to take off her door last week. She's been doing her chores. Her grades are regulated since getting her social media. I took her driving yesterday. She did great. All of the readjusting that I have done with my communication and my anger and just the way that I think has been super effective in our relationship. And it's also brought me and my wife closer together because we're able to relate and bounce ideas off of each other. She's pretty strong in the areas that I was struggling in. So um, we are closer together as parents. And that ultimately is best for our daughter because we all too know what that feels like and it doesn't feel good. So I'm sending love to y'all wherever you guys are. I know this episode was a little bit longer than usual. Tell me one thing that you want to do differently in your parenting. You can email it to me at vankpod@gmail.com. You can also send it in a message on our webpage at www.vankpod.com. And if you are the lucky listener, I will highlight your email to me, of course, anonymously, in the parlor with some tips on what I would do if I was working on the change that you emailed to me. So shoot that email right on over, pay attention to the parlor, and you may be receiving a reply exclusively from me. Until next time, much love, take care, be blessed.